wondering, what in the world was that ref thinking? Well, Mike D, the referee, is here to help you. Join me on Whistle Talk as I talk to professionals on the field and in the booth to help you understand what is going on inside the mind of a football official. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Whistle Talk. Tonight we got the Deep Official Roundtable segment going on. So, once again, I want to thank everybody out there that is listening. We do have a live show going on tonight. So, if you are jumping on with us tonight live, hit up the chat box on YouTube, ask any questions that you may have. We got ourselves a really, really interesting group of gentlemen that have decided to jump on with me today. We are worldwide. We're across the pond once again tonight. Um, so, for those that are listening, hit those like buttons, hit those subscribe buttons. They're all free. They don't cost you anything, and they'll just give you a little bit of a notification when the next episode drops. So, if you're enjoying what you like, hit those buttons. If you're not enjoying what you like, still hit those buttons. Dang it. Come on, support the referees. But please, any comments? I'm here. I want to hear about the comments. I want to know what's going on, what you all are thinking. That's what I'm doing this for, not for myself, but for myself too. I'm not going to lie. I am a little selfish in that aspect because I keep on learning while doing this. But I want to just make this sport a whole lot better. So, with that said, got ourselves five different individuals here tonight, along with myself, making it six, all with a whole lot of different backgrounds, but all with the deep official background. So, very quickly, got Mr. Kevin Blaylock joining us from Kentucky. Kevin, how you doing tonight?
All right, how are you, Mike? I really appreciate you having me. I'm super excited to be here. Like I said before, I'm really excited to hear some international perspectives about what's going on because I don't get a chance to do that a lot. But yeah, I'm excited to be here. Excited to be talking some football in March. So we don't get to do that a lot. So I'm excited about that.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Glad to have you on here. And again, we're going to get different perspectives from all over our country and then all over the world. So that'll bring me to my next guest tonight. We have, and I'm going to try my best, but we got Gaute joining us from Oslo or outside of Oslo, Norway. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing well, Mike. Thank you so much for having me on. Uh, Talking football in March is pretty much baseline for us. Our season starts kicks off next weekend, our domestic season. I'll be working both Norwegian and Swedish domestic leagues this year.
Oh, wow. Awesome. So, yeah, this is a first for me and for having somebody from up in that area. So thank you for joining us. Oh, looks like we just lost one of our guests, little technical difficulties. Sure Ryan will jump back on, but then we also have Mr. James Ford Bannister joining us once again, a repeat offender here on Whistle Talk, joining us from the UK. James, how you doing, sir?
Hey, Mike, it's great to be back. Always enjoy both being on and listening to your show. But like Gauta says, we talk about football all year round, as we spoke about a few weeks back. So, yeah, football in March, not too weird for us.
Awesome, awesome. And then last but not least, that we have on the screen, and Paul looks like he may be having a little technical difficulties also. We got Paul Hershenhan joining us from Tennessee. Paul, you hear us? Paul, when he jumped on with us, had his little infant with him too, so we may be having some baby escapades going on too. And we also have one more guest, Ryan Wallace, who looks like he just jumped off the screen. Ryan is joining us from the Centennial Conference. Oh, we just lost Paul too. I'm kicking everybody out. All right, so we're getting smaller and smaller and whittling it down. Who's next? Oh, just kidding. So anyway, with the three gentlemen I have still here with us, guys, once again, truly do appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedules. Gaute, I know it is quite late where you are. It is only 7:30 Eastern time here in New Jersey at time of recording here in March. By the time that we're going to be publishing this episode, it might be the next day for you.
Oh, it already is. We're past midnight.
All right. Well, once again, he did mention that he was a night owl. So, all right.
Well, you picked a good time for us. It's only 4 hours and 5 hours rather than 5 and 6.
Yeah, and during football season or football preseason, James and I tend to have very late conversations going, not necessarily with ourselves, but with others who are also night owls during preseason.
Good stuff. Yeah, I know a lot of stuff. I mean, goodness, you're a week from your domestic season. That's right around the corner. So your mind's definitely going to be on football right now. So you're definitely a great guest to have on here tonight. So, gentlemen, the deep official. You guys have been doing it for a little bit time now. I did it for 2 or 3 games, and then realized that it wasn't for me. And I've mentioned this story before, and I was just talking about it with Kevin earlier. The last game that I worked as a back judge was on a 5-man game, and I had never worked a 5-man crew prior to the previous 2 games. So this was my third game that I had ever experienced because when I was a cadet, we did all 6-man crews that I was watching. So I got thrown onto a 5-man crew as a back judge. And this last particular game that I worked, their running back was the 100-meter state champion sprinter. Broke off about a 70-yard run, and he was so far out in front of the rest of the defense. He was messing with me. He was literally swerving back and forth because I kept on trying to open my hips up to beat him to the goal line, and he was literally just playing games with me. And I thought I had him to the goal line. I stopped. He passed me, gave me the ball. I put my hands up in the air, signaling touchdown. And then I looked down and realized I was on the 1 yard line. And thank goodness, but nobody ever said boo to me. The coaches didn't say anything. I got away with that one. But yeah, that was my last experience of being in the deep spot. At that point in time, I kind of thought, I might be better off closer to the line of scrimmage. So, all right, we got Paul back and we got Ryan back. Gents, how are you guys?
Good. Sorry about that, Mike. I think just as soon as we went live, something crashed. So I had trouble with the connection. So I think I'm good now.
Yep, and we got Paul back to joining us from Tennessee. Paul, how are you doing, sir?
I'm doing good, sir. How are you? I
Doing
think
fantastic.
I have the same. I have the same excuse as Ryan. My whole system crashed.
All right. Well, we're glad to have you back. Um, so tonight's episode, we're going to be focusing on the deep officials, and it seems like with the deep officials that predominantly, in my opinion, you guys kind of are able to get lost in the game, which I really, really enjoy in that aspect because you can kind of stay back. But the thing about it that other people don't realize is the utmost importance that you have because you may be in a very tight game where the teams are grinding like ball out, running the ball, running the ball, running the ball, but it's one play. All of a sudden, that one play happens, and there's a deep ball coming to your sideline, and you got to be awake. You got to be ready to rock and roll. So that's a challenge in its own right, just the mental aspect of it. So I'm just throwing one of the things out there. Ryan, what do you think is probably one of the more difficult things for you to handle as being a deep official?
Well, yeah, it's a great question, Mike. Um, you were talking about just, being focused just right there, just the whole game. Even in a game where you got a ton of running and then you get that one play and then all of a sudden it's in your lap. So it's, we always get razzed by the short wing saying, well, you guys just get the balls. But no, we're locked in. We got to be locked in every play because, next thing you know, you got a deep pass or you got a tight sideline play or lots of times we're positioned on the goal line. That's the most important line in football. So that's staying focused has got to be the most important thing that we're doing back there. Got to be locked into what's going to happen, what could potentially happen on any given down. Staying just engaged with the down and distance and anticipating, what could happen that next play. Um, but, to answer more specifically, I guess to your question, you're saying what's the most challenging point that we have as deeps? Is that what you're asking, Mike?
Yeah.
Okay, so challenging. You definitely got to know, your goal line rules. As I said, your position on the goal line, a good part of the game. So, anytime that I'm on that goal line, I'm very anticipating, what can happen on this play, what happens when this back, breaks it. I'm looking at, is he going to be on that tight sideline pylon type of a play? Those are where we earn our money as deep wings on those types of plays.
Good stuff. Oh, we lost Paul again. Paul still having some technical difficulties. Um, so yeah, I mean, there's a lot that you got to keep in mind, and that goal line is like it's. I mean, we just had St. Patrick's Day pass, but that's the pot of gold. That's the Leprechaun's pot of gold. You got that. That is your protection. You got to own that goal line, and yeah, anything that happens with it, you're going to hear about it, but from somebody, unfortunately. Uh, so again, joining us from Norway, Gauta, how are you, sir?
Again, doing fine. I think one of the more challenging things, just like Ryan saying, the goal line stuff, but also the staying engaged and preparing for the worst. James and I usually just joke about, well, people, some people tend to say that working the deep is easy because, again, we just get the balls, but usually the most tiring mental aspect is that nothing, 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 game changing call, nothing, nothing, career ender, nothing, nothing. And that's just every day. Uh, but staying engaged through that nothing is one of the bigger aspects for me, is trying to engage with coaches, engage with players. If it's a run to the other side, widening the view to find something to officiate, and then come in and talk to the guys, just be there as a some sort of like, not necessarily an extra umpire, but just being a body helping out. And finding that something to do is probably the hard part, but once you get there, it becomes so much easier and so much more enjoyable working the deep. At least that's my experience.
And yeah, we were just talking pre-recording about a gentleman that helps out here a lot in New Jersey, Ed Camp, and one of his sayings that he always throws at us is don't officiate air. Find something to go do, get yourself involved, make sure that you're staying involved. And yeah, the deep wings get busted on a lot on the different crews and stuff like that. But I am going to say I was predominantly a short wing before moving to the umpire position, and having that good deep wing on my sideline was huge, huge. It made my life so much easier. It made me mentally more relaxed, knowing that I've got somebody back there that I can trust. They're going to have their keys, and when they do throw a flag, it's probably going to be of a 15-yard variety too. So they're going to be mindful of what they're doing, and like you said, game changing and possibly or career ending. So they're huge plays. So you guys are definitely in a very stressful position in the mental aspect back there, let alone all the running back and forth you're going to be doing coming back and forth.
And I love what Galto was talking about after a play, especially if you've got something that's towards your sideline, you really want to get in and kind of help get guys up and help know where the ball is and get that ball back to your umpire. And pre-snap routine is a big deal for me, staying in the game. And Ryan, I looked at um that Word document that you sent us when preparing for the talk tonight, and it was just so good talking about getting into a pre-snap routine. And once the play is over, you get right back into that routine, and you're right back into doing the same things. You're getting your count, you're checking off with your back judge, you're clearing your sideline, you're making sure you getting stopped and getting into a good spot and having that routine and making it cyclical, just something that you do every single time. It definitely helps me to stay in a game, especially one where we've got a lot of guys that are running and we've got a lot of ground and pound. I can find myself better preparing for that big play that Galdo was talking about if I know I'm in my pre-snap routine and I keep it consistent throughout the game.
Yeah, 100%. And that's going to be going across the board too, of just of knowing what you're doing and getting yourself into that routine. I know, being to you, my routine is I'm married to the R during the game, so we're always looking at each other. And I know, as the deep officials, you tend to be married across the field with your other sideline, or if you're a back judge in the middle of the field, you're looking at both sidelines. Plus, now if you're a deep wing, you're also looking down to your short wing down your sideline. So you guys are married and doing all those different things. So if you don't have yourself a good routine, find one, and find one. And I'll refer also to Ryan saying, find one that works for you. Find one that makes you feel comfortable, that you can make into your habit, with your mechanics, with your rules and all that stuff, because we do have different levels here tonight with us, from the college level to the professional level to the high school level. Well, knowing your rules, but then having your mechanics and feeling comfortable with that, just it's going to make the snap of the ball seem easy. You do all that hard work before the snap, it makes the snap of the ball stuff seem pretty easy. All right, so we got Paul back with us here from Tennessee. Paul, thank you once again for joining us. Um, Paul, quick question for you. What's the situation? How many officials do you guys typically have in Tennessee for your games? Are you a 5-man crew, 6-man, 7-man?
Well, I know that I do not work high school anymore. I got I'm very fortunate to be elevated to that Division 1 level, but I know that they do 5 and 7, and then in the playoffs is strictly 7.
Okay.
Um, and to be honest, Mike, other than that, I don't know much of what they do what they do out there. Uh, I get too wrapped up on the Saturday game, but I do know they're trying to push more of 7. It's just here we have the issue, I know, at that level of bodies, of just people in general, is the big issue right now.
So,
But I do know they primarily do 7 if they can.
okay.
I was talking to Mike about that before we got on before we went live. You know, here in Bowling Green, we're pretty close to the Tennessee line, especially around Portland and White House, and lots of little bitty towns up above Nashville. So we have a lot of guys that double dip, and they'll call ball in Kentucky, and they'll also call ball in Tennessee. And our 7-man mechanics in Kentucky is based off of the Tennessee 7-man mechanics. So we have a whole lot of guys, just because we need so many bodies. We can talk all night about the shortage of officials, but because we need so many bodies, especially guys that are on that border, they'll double dip and they'll call Tuesdays and Thursdays in Kentucky and go to Tennessee for Fridays, and then flip flop back around. And it's really, really good, us being close. And I think the states have a really good relationship with one another, where the mechanics are very similar. And
Hmm.
I can I haven't called a game in Tennessee, but I would not feel comfortable jumping on a Tennessee crew, because I feel like our mechanics are so similar to one another.
That is
So,
pretty much the same situation that we have in Norway and Sweden at the moment, because the Swedish domestic league expanded, added a Norwegian team, which made they expanded to more Swedish teams, and they were lacking officials. So we are a big group now, double dipping, both from Norway into Swedish league, and from Denmark also working Swedish league. So that cross border, if your mechanics are similar enough, or in our case, we work the same mechanics. So having that exchange of ideas has been is very helpful for generating a higher level. You won't get higher numbers, but you'll get potentially a higher level of officiating just from that um, transfer of ideas.
yeah, absolutely. Paul, quick question. I know we kind of lost you a little bit earlier. Well, I knew that you were in the collegiate level. I thought you were working both. What level are you working right now? What
I am
conference?
in the I am in the Ohio Valley Conference and the United Athletic Conference right now.
Gotcha. Great football going on there. A lot of fun. You
It is
still
a lot
getting
of fun.
those Thursday night games too?
Yep, my first game last season was a Thursday night game. It was at
Very
Morehead
nice. Very
State.
nice. Good stuff. Good stuff. That's fun. Those are fun games. And last but not least, I got Mr. James Ford Bannister joining us once again. James, last time we were on, we talked a little bit about white hat stuff and some different things like that. But James does a lot of different training stuff with the UK and over in Europe. So, James, quick question for you: the communication aspect that deep wings need to have with each other. What do you feel is probably one of the most important things that they have to do with working with their partners on the field and having that nice symbiotic cohesiveness to them?
I think it's a very interesting relationship because it is almost symbiotic, particularly if you're lucky enough to work crews. I mean, Galter and I get to work fairly regularly in one of our leagues, but it's not every week, and it's lucky that we both think in a very similar way. But I was teaching at a clinic last week, the weekend just gone, so it wasn't much long ago, but talking about keys, talking about zones, and talking about threats. And a lot of working as a deep official is about trust. So in the pre-snap, unless there's information I need to communicate from a play or some information from a previous play they want to communicate to me, a lot of that communication is just this.
Yep.
And then when the play is live, it's knowing, right, who's my key? Are they threatened? If they're not threatened, can I cheat? Can I take off tackle? What's coming into the mesh point? Okay, which of those mesh points is in my zone? Where have I potentially got help? We've got 3 receivers. Okay, we can probably split them between the 3 deeps with some help from the shorts. I've got 2 receivers, 2 deeps, and the back judge is going to pick the biggest threat. You're doing all of that at the back of your head. You're not really thinking too much about it. But I wanted to pick up something you said earlier, which I thought was really pertinent with deep wings in relationship to their short wings. Because again, there's not huge amounts of direct communication between those two, but I talk about this a lot when evaluating particularly deep wing officials. There are some great deep wing officials working the game, and you can say, that's a great call. They know their rules, their mechanics are good. But what makes a truly great deep wing official is all the stuff that happens dead ball. Like we spoke about earlier, getting in, being involved in that dead ball situation, but also knowing what the coach wants, when they want it, and how they want it delivered, and delivering it in a way that keeps the temperature of the game in a good place. Sometimes you don't have all the information on the O2O, and you have to keep them calm until you've got all that information and give your short wings as much time as they need to do all those other duties like enforce penalties or just generally keep the game running.
No, that's great stuff. And yeah, a lot of people don't realize how much interaction the deep wings and the deep officials do have with the sidelines, still with the coaches on the sidelines and different things like that. So, and that does show what a great crew is when you're seeing everybody kind of work in sync with everybody. Where somebody's got the flag, communicating with the U and the R about what's going on. Somebody's dealing with the coach and letting them know their options and different things like that. Because especially me with the high school level and probably more often than not at the collegiate level, we have captains that walk out for a coin flip, but pretty much no coaches are kind of letting them make the call on if they're accepting a penalty or declining a penalty. You're kind of looking to the sideline to find out what's going on. Even though we have them out there, they're kind of almost showpieces today in today's day and age because we're also getting coach, what do you want if you win the coin toss? We're getting that beforehand so that the kid doesn't mess it up too. So, but you got a lot of different things like that going on. James, you had mentioned about the keys and the mechanics. So I got a couple of clips here, some films, but I thought this one was a great segue to some different ideas here. So let me make sure I pull this up here. Go full screen. Get this baby big. So what you have here is a double-double situation, and you're going to have a motion coming across. So for the most part, what is the deep official's initial key? Who are they looking at for you guys? You could just all call it out. What receiver, one or two in this situation?
Number one,
Yeah, I'm
in
looking
a
at one right
double-double.
now.
Yeah. Um,
Yep.
our
And for
mechanics
those
might differ
people,
from yours slightly though, because we go one, but in this case they're playing so soft that we'd be straight to zone, working for threats more than keying on a guy.
We
so
would,
now what you're referring to is the man zone ball type of scenario. So you're thinking more of the zone concept.
Yeah, just from the corner being 7 yards off. So you have time to identify which of the two defenders is going to be the threat, and which of the receivers is going to be your deep threat into your or into who's going to get into your zone.
Especially as on this play, right? It's very easy for those two receivers to cross, and actually the inside guy to be more interesting to you by the time there's any chance of a foul.
Yeah.
Oh, so here we go.
Yeah.
Oh, trying to back it up here. So what we have going on, let me go to the other camera angle here, is you're going to have motion coming across to make it a trips look. So now it's going to change on who the keys are and everybody's focus. But we still got a deep official. I'm sorry, the short official is getting that flag there. You see now, but how do you guys deal with a play like that where you're going from a 2-by-2 situation to now a trips look, and with keys changing, and you did have that cross type of situation? So Ryan, like what would be your thought process when you see that motion guy coming across?
Well, I mean, for the back judge, that motion guy is probably going to be your key at the snap. So I'm probably going to be keying on him as the back judge. Deep wings are always number one on. So that particular play really doesn't change. At the snap there, it looked like he was past the tackle. So I think the back judge will be on that motion man.
Okay. And how about you, Paul?
So on that formation, we're kind of taught to we want to cover who's threatened first, who's going to be threatened first. I've got to know, and the actual cool thing that they changed is we don't call that outside guy. We don't call them keys anymore. They've changed it in our book is who's your initial responsibility.
Yeah.
So I look at that formation to say I'm responsible for both of these guys out here. And then when we see that tight end motion over, I kind of say, okay, well, we got to take him too. He's going to be our first threat right here. But we're always going to start at number one. And I always say, I'm going to start at one and I'm going to find work inside. I'm going to find work at the further in we go. When you run that play, the first thing I saw, and especially when you went to the backfield end zone shot, was I noticed that Deep Wing's first moves were inside, but he has a different colored jersey in the opposite bench back there. And that was one of the things I wanted to ask you about was what are your guys' thoughts on that?
Yeah, I saw that as well. Him coming in at an angle like that doesn't really add anything to the play. So coming down the sideline would be more beneficial to both cleanup and whatever action happens next. Because what happens next is if I'm that deep wing, I don't have a flag down, but my wing does. So I need to get that guy out, then go find a coach, so I can relay the information of what's going on. So coming infield is very tempting, but in that instance, coming down the sideline would be more beneficial to the situation than in there. You have help from the inside, so there's no point in going in.
And I heard you guys all, or a couple of you chuckle too, when you saw the play going to the sideline and the short wing doing that hurdle over top of the players because the play was coming right at them. So that's one of those situations where we talk about of somebody having your back and knowing because that short wing did a heck of a job of getting over those players and killing the play and still holding the spot and did everything really really well on that one. But having that other guy coming down, crashing down to help them out, I think would have definitely been beneficial in that scenario, especially because now that short wing had a couple players behind him now too. So you're always
Hmm.
going to have those extra set of eyes going on behind you. James, I saw you give the double point to Paul when he was mentioning something.
Oh, initial responsibility. It's a phrase that I really like because we also talk about initial keys if you really want to use the term keys. Because I can think like we covered, if the guys are in soft, there is absolutely no threat to that player, at least for a second or so into the snap, and you can get information elsewhere. Which I think if you take this play is really interesting because it's a run. So we talk about keys primarily or initial responsibilities primarily on pass plays. So if I'm the back judge on this play and I'm reading the motion guy's not going to threaten anybody until the ball's snapped and they get to a defensive player. So I'm going to be aware of where they're coming because he's coming around tackle. It gives me a perfect opportunity to read off tackle. If I'm reading run, I'm now going, right, what's my first threat to the side the ball is going, working inside out. And I would expect my deep wing to be doing the exact opposite. Where's my nearest threat to the side the ball is going, working outside in. And if we do that, and then the short wing's picking up, in a play like this, that short wing is normally thinking about personal preservation and not being run into by a player. So we may not get as much help as we would normally get when it gets out wide because they're picking up the runner as they're coming out, being aware of their progress while also trying to pick up anything that's a threat ahead of that run. So we're all trying to piece it together in a sort of varying sized cones of vision and varying sized zones as we move across it.
All right. So I got another one here. Let me make sure I get the right clip that I want to pull up. Here we go. Full screen. There it is. So we're gonna have we got a trips formation now to the top of the screen. We got looks like trips closed, tight ends down at the bottom of the screen here on the offensive right side. Running back's going to get the handoff, start coming to their right, and all of a sudden they're bouncing it back. Now this is a Division II championship semifinal game, so this is a pretty big game. And the mechanics on this one, I think, are fantastic by the deep official on the far sideline. So let this one kind of play out. So let me run that back and play that one more time. Now that everyone's
Was that the
all
deep
right.
wing that
So
popped into frame there at the end?
I think
yes,
so.
sir.
After
And
separating 81 and zone number 0, I think he went to separate and then came into frame at the very end there.
Mm-hmm.
yep.
He came from a long way. He was
So
hustling hard, getting up there and getting that help. Your short wing has got the spot, and he got up there really really quick, probably a whole lot quicker than I can, to get there and get and have the help and keep guys from doing something stupid. That was really good. He was hustling hard.
now there was also another thing that did occur on that. And did any of you catch that holding penalty? So the deep wing had, and it was tough to see the flag on that view. I'm trying to pull up the secondary view.
Was that on the two players that were jostling downfield?
Correct. Yep, it was on the number one receiver. Let's see, is this the view that I want?
Not sure if I love the call, but I love the hustle and getting in there.
Yeah, my feeling on this was, yeah, it's probably a hold, but is it the kind of hold you want to call? It's the sort of thing that I would be expecting a deep wing to be coming in and saying, yeah, I saw it. The tackle was made back there. I saw it. Come on, guys, let's break it up.
So now here's a different view of it. And I love this perspective. I love the perspective that you all are given too. So you see the running back bounce. And right there, kind of the tug, and you see the flag come in at the end there. I don't know if you were able to see the flag. Happened late, but he had the flag on it. Got to backtrack, and I know we're getting a little lag here with our streaming aspect.
Yeah, I think okay. I see the flag. I see the flag coming in there late. I think I'm with James. I mean, that may be a situation where I pull a guy aside and say something to him. Make sure he keeps his hands inside, or make sure he watches his hands. But I don't know if I necessarily like a holding call right there.
It was 10 yards downfield, right?
Mm-hmm.
It looks like there was no advantage gained there. So, yeah, I'm going to lay off that one. But, I agree with what James and what Kevin just said. I mean, it might be a talk to there. But, if it's a whole other story if, that back breaks it past him and he's got his jersey like that. And then I think we got definitely, not only smoke, but that would be a good flag there.
Yeah. We talk about point of attack a lot, and probably so much that it becomes cliche, but it becomes cliche because it's so important. If we're calling every single hold, we're going to be there all day long. Having that, we've been talking a lot about that cone of vision as the ball comes towards you or moves away from you, as you're reading pass, as you're reading run, and your keys or your initial responsibilities or your continuing responsibilities are changing. That cone of vision is getting wide and getting more narrow as the ball moves. Really getting into the point of calling those holds that have advantage, like Ryan was saying, more at the point of attack instead of downfield. That goes a really, really long way with coaches, and it goes a really, really long way with not stopping the clock. Really keeps the game rolling smoother, I think.
So the head of our association. Oh, sorry. I was going to say, the head of our association here in the UK is an umpire, like you, Mike, and he always. I like this analogy. It works in any position. He talks about it from the umpire position, normally about offensive linemen, but it sort of repeats "it's a hold" to himself 3 times. It's a hold. I've seen a grab. It's a hold. I've seen a restriction. It's a hold. There has been an advantage gained. Particularly here, like it's 10 yards downfield. Now, if there was a bit of running around and you're like, okay, maybe this player could have got back in time to make the tackle. Sure. But in a play where it's that far downfield and the tackle is made almost immediately, like Kevin was kind of alluding to there, it inserts us into the game when we don't need to be there.
And most likely in that scenario, that penalty was probably going to be declined anyway. Not that we want to have the predisposition in our minds of what's going on, but again, in the term that I always use is letting the play marinate. And before you're throwing that flag, if you let that play marinate, then you're probably going to keep that flag tucked in. All right, I got one more here that I want to share with you all. This one is not a holding penalty, but more of what a lot of people think the deep officials are looking for. So we got motion coming across, little play action, pop pass to the tight end. You guys got anything?
We're looking at DPI here, Mike. It's kind of hard. My video is a little bit jumpy, but it looks like it. looks like he gets he restricts him here away from making a play on the ball. So I'm okay if this is DPI, balls in the air.
Yeah, it looks like that left arm is coming across his shoulder, keeping him from going up. Kind of hard to tell from the video from this angle, but
the other night. Yeah, and I apologize for the video being a little grainy with how we're doing this, but this one was talked about that it shouldn't have been called. It looked more of the feet being tied together, and so that was the conversation that we kind of really dove into with this one, was just, do you really have interference here if you have the feet getting tangled? Because by the looks of it, it kind of looks like the defensive back is trying to make a play on the ball. His eyes are back to the ball. So I'm going to go kind of slow with it. You see his eyes are back to the ball. He's reaching up for the ball, but I definitely see that left arm that you were talking about possibly being a hold. So I don't know what the back judge had here, if it was because they got tangled up and were brought to the ground, or if it was because of that left arm. But this was one that was talked about being possibly not thrown for the reason of having their feet tangled. So
Yeah.
what are you guys' thoughts with plays like that when the feet get tied up with each other?
Well, you know, I'd love to hear from some perspectives from people that call higher levels, because I call high school ball, and that's all that I call. I go to camps every single year with college officials, and they always talk about they always talk about their criteria for pass interference. And I always try to remember it, but I never remember it, and I never take notes because I'm not doing what I'm supposed to do. But we talk about a grab and restrict, right? We talk about an arm bar. We talk about a turn. There's a couple more. I try to, when I'm talking to college guys, I try to apply those to the way that I call pass interference in high school. High school pass interference, I think, can be different than college pass interference, but I've found that if I can put those criteria in place, I can be right more times than not. But I often forget them more than I remember them.
So,
Yeah,
so Kevin, it's good you bring that up, because the first thing, if I called that, the first thing my assigner is going to say is time and circumstance. Do we want to set our bar there today for the next 60 minutes? Is that where our bar is going to be? On that play, I really wish I could see the write up of it, but on that play, from my perspective, we're passing, because I don't see the DB's playing the ball more than anything, and the receiver we talk about. Did the receiver get to the spot he wanted to be at on that route? Did he get to where he wanted to be? And those are the questions you have to ask, that we have to ask ourselves with plays like that. Is, okay, time and circumstance. We're at the beginning of the game. We're 4 minutes into this. We have a tight play here. Do we want to set our bar for pass interference at this spot? And I hate to say it, but if we called that a collegiate game, we're gonna have a long day. Is it's a tight play, but I personally don't think it's enough there for it to be pass interference. I see a receiver's got him. Everybody forgets the defender has as much right to the ball as the receiver does.
Right. Amen.
And in that play there, he's not obviously has obvious intent to impede the receiver from making a play on the ball. He's trying to make it himself. And from a collegiate aspect, we do think about the categories. Okay, does it fit this category? But we also think about time and circumstance, and how do we want this game to flow today?
And I don't mean to take up so much time, but Paul, that's so interesting to me. Do y'all ever talk about advantage versus disadvantage? I don't think that's a phrase we use a lot in football.
All the time.
It's a big phrase in basketball, and I'm just getting into lacrosse too, and we use it a lot in lacrosse. So lacrosse is a contact sport, and guys are moving fast and they're moving hard, and a lot of incidental things are happening. And when something happens, the first thing we're taught as lacrosse officials is, has this caused an advantage to someone? Has this caused a disadvantage to someone? And I think that if we added that vernacular, and college, that's great. I don't think we talk about it in high school enough. I feel like if we added that vernacular to things like pass interference, if we added it to things like holding, if we added it to things, not I wanted to say kick catching interference, but not kick catching interference. I think there's a lot of judgment calls that if we could stop and slow down and go, did somebody gain an advantage or was somebody disadvantaged by what just happened? I think we can get a whole lot more things right than we do.
In
Yeah,
the
and
international game in IFF level, advantage disadvantage is a very big thing for particularly the blocking fouls, but also for pass interferences and stuff like that. So a lot of the rules philosophy goes to: is there advantage gained? Yes, no. If yes, might be a foul. So I think it's creeping into the vernacular. It just might not be everywhere.
No, great stuff with everybody there, and I agree 100% about what you're saying. With is there an advantage, and that goes across the board with everything that we're talking about with all of the fouls. And I know Ryan at the clinic where you and I first sat down and talked. I know a lot of the talk was about the timing of the game, and like Paul just mentioned, that particular play, and I pulled it off the screen. That was at the 12:30 mark of the first quarter. So is that having a major effect on the remainder of the game? So the time of the game does does make a difference in some of the things that we're going to look to call. Ryan, what do you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, that was great that Paul, probably the first thing you looked at, Paul, so you must be a side judge. Looking at the time and score is just such an important aspect of the game. And we as deep officials, that's a big responsibility that we really need to be on top of our game with, knowing the clock rules, um, especially too, as we get not only in the opening quarter, but that's when time is really critical, and we got to be on top of our game and be on top of our clock rules for things. In a college game, we have the 2 minute timeout now, and things change with 2 minutes. So we're in high school ball. It's a little bit different with stopping the clock every time on out of bounds plays for runs. But that's one thing is we as deep officials, we can be really help a crew um, be an excellent crew if we're on top of the clock, and it can also really sink a crew if we kind of fall asleep on the clock, and all of a sudden we got a dead clock, and the clock's still running, then that's not a good look.
I can really echo that because I was working our university college national championship game last week. I was working referee, not deep, and both the deep wing and the back judge on a play that ended at the 3-yard line. The stadium clock expires, and they immediately both come in and say, "We have a timeout from the team," and there was 1 second on the clock when it was called, and that awareness was huge in just maintaining that relationship with the coach on that sideline. And just when you're part of that crew and you know that the deeps have got that for you, you know you're going to be in for a good day.
That's great stuff. That awesome hearing stuff like that. So I want to kind of segue into another topic, which I know for the deep officials can be a very tricky one, and for all officials. But that fun part of the kick game that I know can get a lot of us a little bit messed up. Oh boy, James is like, all right, bring it on now.
James
You
is
know,
licking his lips
Mike,
over there. Look at that.
Mike,
Love a kick play.
do we really have to talk about kick plays? Do we really have to?
And Paul does not share James's enthusiasm.
Well,
This is where we earn our game checks.
it was kind of funny. I worked a collegiate scrimmage this morning. They were practicing, and somebody asked me, "What's your least favorite play of a football game?" I said, "Any kick play," because they don't practice it, and if anything's going to go wrong, a kick is involved.
And just about
100%.
everything's
It
different.
is.
And just about everything's different.
Yeah, and one of the issues that we tend to have is people practice it even less in domestic leagues in Europe. So the stuff you only get on your tests. We have that on tape. So the double muff with battings in the end zone and stuff like that. All the crazy stuff happens, and because it's a kick play that we hardly ever practice or watch because it's such a small amount of game time or film of it, we tend to uh, not have the same amount of reps as we do for every other type of play, which is why we tend to mess them up, and hence why they're not our favorite type of play usually. I'm not a big fan either, but I've managed to get it into my pre-snap routine to consider what uh, what type of play will happen if worst case scenario for every time. I Because we don't work fixed crews, um, what you do when in your pre-snap might have to change. So I ended up making my pre-snap modular. So some stuff I can move around to make sure that it meshes with, if we're doing count at one point, that has to be count and control. That has to be at one point. But some of the other stuff I might have to move around to make sure that I cover all my bases. Because if I'm married to my pre-snap and somebody's married to their pre-snap and they don't interconnect, we're gonna have a long day with 160 plus snaps of us not communicating well. So getting worst case scenario into my pre-snap has really helped with my with how I process those plays.
See, now this is where I think I'm a little bit of a unique individual when it comes to the officiating aspect of it. And this is where I take off my officiating hat and put back on my old school coaching hat for coaching for 20 years. When I started off at a college level, I was working a Division 3 level. I was the assistant special teams coordinator. And so learning the kick game to me, what was so important, because I was taught in the college years that defense wins championships, but in the order of importance, it goes defense one, special teams two, offense three. You could have the worst offense in the world as a coach. If your defense doesn't let them score, well, the worst you're going to do is tie. And if you've got a good special teams, you're going to get a good punt return, a good block, something like that. You're going to win the game 3-0 without the offense ever getting a first down potentially. So the special teams come second and then offense. So I've always brought that in. And ironically enough, I was an offensive coordinator through my high school coaching career, but I emphasize special teams. So as a coach, I always kind of tried to look for those little different tweaks and stuff like that that maybe I could take advantage of and over practice it. So I think I was unique. So now putting the officiating hat back on, it's something that I appreciate the coaches knowing and different things like that. But I also do see where it gets us crossed up so many different times as opposed to the 75, 80 other snaps in the game where that's just common. It's common as opposed to the 15 snaps on the kick game. So
And
my
Mike, on
first
that, I
question,
couldn't agree more with the whole special teams coverage thing, because in our leagues generally the quality is not quite, certainly at home it's very variable and it's not quite as probably as good as certainly Paul sees on a week to week basis. And special teams can win games. And one of the key things, just to Gauter's point about pre-snap, is that I think we can all be guilty of going, it's a punt, it's going to look like every other punt. It's a field goal, it's going to look like every other field goal. It's a kickoff, it's going to look like every other kickoff. But if you just say to yourself, like, I mean, I'm back judge, I'm covering the punt returner, there's not a lot else I do on that play until the return starts. I'm good, he's going to muff it. But just tell me that he's going to muff it, because if he doesn't muff it, great. We have every other punt that I've seen 1,000 times. But if something weird happens, I'm ready. Because otherwise, same with onside kicks. If you go, this is going to be the same old deep kick, and then they kick it onside, your mechanics, your body moves, your eyes jump, you're not looking in the right place, you miss a block, you miss a touch, you let your crew down. And if you're ready for those weird and wonderful situations, it gives you a much better chance to succeed.
Yeah,
and
good,
You know,
and
a
James,
good
not
tip with
find
that.
yourself shocked.
I was going to say a good tip with that, James, is officiate every free kick play like it's going to be onside until it's not. You know, so because you always do have that surprise one. I had one week one last year, and sure enough, it was a surprise onside kick. But that's a way that you can kind of prepare yourself for. expecting the unexpected.
So my first question then for everybody on the panel tonight is a mechanics question, because again, here in New Jersey, we're 6-person mechanics. Both of our deep officials on the sideline are behind the punt returner. What happens when you get that muff or that the ball bouncing around on the ground where it looks like it ricocheted off of the returner, but it really didn't? How do you guys work those particular plays with communication with your other officials on the field?
So if I can jump in on that one really quick, because maybe we were talking pre going live, or maybe it was during the beginning, but I think at one point somebody talked about doing whatever their referee told them to do. That's kind of the way a lot of times, especially at least in my association, that we have mechanics for punts. I think the Tennessee mechanic, which is what we're supposed to go by in Kentucky for high school football, is that the back judge is supposed to be 5 to 7 yards behind the deepest receiver, and then the deep wings are supposed to be even with the punt returner. That way, if that muff happens, like you're talking about, we've got really, really good eyes on it. We're also looking at gunners coming down as well. But as you know, as that gunner comes down and he doesn't become a threat anymore, we can kind of change that cone of vision, and we can really help out on things like muffs. But then on other nights, I'll go on the Friday night field and the referee will say, no, I want y'all all even on the same line. And then we struggle getting that play like you're talking about. I really like the deep wings to be even with the deepest receiver, and then that back judge being behind. That's what I prefer. But it seems like we can't figure out how to be consistent about it. And it kind of drives me a little bit crazy. I don't know if anybody else struggles with the same thing. College, you got a lot of eyes on you. I don't know what the eyes look like. I don't know what the eyes look like overseas. But in small town Kentucky, whatever we're doing that night is what everybody wants to do, and it drives me nuts.
The reason that I'm bringing this
Yeah,
question up
it's
because of us here in New Jersey being more 6-man crews. This is a mechanic that we've changed a number of different times in recent years, of being even with the returner, one official being even, the other one being behind, just in case you got the deep kick. So that's why I'm curious to hear, even the games that you get with the 5-man mechanic, who's keeping a look on that. The one thing, and going to your point here, Kevin, that my white hat, my crew chief, tells us is after that first flow of everybody goes past me as an umpire, I'm turning my head back around to try to save the crew, to see if I can get something like that. If it was a muff, if the returner was just trying to play games and be near the ball, even though they're screaming poison to get away from the ball when the ball hits the ground. So different things like that. So he tells us, don't worry about those small little tug holds that you may see that some people want to throw the flag on. Going again to what we've already talked about of, did it really have an effect on the play? Those holds aren't going to have an effect on the play, but missing a potential muff where my crewmate might be behind the returner and didn't catch, I could possibly, as an umpire, catch that. So it's a difficult mechanic for all of us in New Jersey, and again, it's something that we've changed a number of different times. Ryan, you were about to say something. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to say, Mike, you were just talking about 6-man. It's so much harder with 2 deep officials versus 3. Back judges got the catch the whole time. That makes it so much easier. But in a 6-man, I feel like it does change from crew to crew. In Pennsylvania, actually, I think we have one guy either lined up. I think it's the F, either lined up right with the deepest returner or slightly in front, and then the opposite wing official is 5 yards behind. But I always like to start deep. I'll go 10 yards deeper than the returner. I just find that it's easier to move forward than it is backwards. You get a really big, windy day, and it's, all of a sudden the kick's going way over your head. Now you got to scramble back to the goal line, keep everybody in front of you. It's much easier to move forward than it is to go backwards, especially on punt plays.
Yeah, I fully support the rather be deeper and move forward than being too shallow and then having to haul ass backwards.
And that
Um,
make and that makes sense, especially when you have something that's going over your head, or you have that muff that goes backwards instead of bouncing off and going forward. It makes sense to be a little bit deeper. That does. That makes a lot of sense.
but also for a muff to really matter, like we will see the muff even with fairly soft eyes, but it doesn't really matter unless there's a threat from different colors recovering the ball, right? So we don't need to be laser focused necessarily on that muff. We just need to know who's coming in. At least in a six-man crew, we are, because in a six-man crew you're still covering the gunner, right? So you can, if you know where he is in relation to that ball, you will know if it's your responsibility to be dead sure about that muff or not, depending on how close the ball gets to you, how far out to the sideline. There are lots of variables that kind of change that dynamic. But
Yeah,
again,
I
absolutely.
it
think
is so much easier with three deeps.
Yeah,
And
as
one
to
of
say,
the
I think Ryan makes a great point that if you have a back judge, everything is easier. Sorry, Paul, you were going to say something.
Well, what I was going to say is having three guys back there makes life so much easier because I've always loved it because the back judge has one responsibility. He's got the returner no matter he moves with him. One of the things that we've started doing in our conference is the collegiate manual talks about they want us to stay as perfectly still for as long as we can because your eyes move when you move. And but we realized that on punt plays, especially any scrimmage kick play, that we equate it to if we stand still for too long, we're not going to be in the same time zone as the rest of the play. So what we've started doing is the two deep wings will start 7 yards behind the returner, and of course we have the outside gunner coming down. If the backside official, so when the ball's kicked, if it's away from you, we're taught to move up to basically get straight lined with the returner wherever he goes. Because we know the philosophy of what's the first foul that will happen on a punt play after the ball's caught? It's a block in the back. And who's always the guy that commits it? Most of the time it's the backside gunner that's let him go by him and blocks him.
Yep, makes sense. I like that.
It's usually the single or the backside. If they
Mm-hmm.
go double team, they're not going to be beat and go into chase mode. But single guy kick goes away. I'm looking to where he is going to be when that guy catches up to him.
And the other thing that I've liked about it since we've started doing that is we help our back judge with KCI, with kick
Yes.
catch interference, to where if he gets screened out, I'm straight lined with him. We can tell if he's within that 1 yard barrier cylinder of that returner not being able to catch that ball. And I think I wish more places would do it because it's much easier to officiate the play with that process as a deep official.
Now,
And
James,
I think Paul's point there. Sorry, Mike, you go.
I was just gonna say, do you guys have what we used to refer to as the halo rule around the returner of being inside that cylinder? That's actually not a high school rule here. That's not part of the NFHS rule book. So the defense can be right there. So there really is no kick catching interference unless there's contact. Is that the same rule for you guys overseas? Do you have
Yeah,
a cylinder?
we're broadly the same. It's not entirely the same, but it's broadly the same as the NCAA guys. So our rule set is that. But I think the point about blocks in the back is really interesting because for me, I mean, Gauter's probably had me whinge about this 1,000 times, but that phase that you go through as a deep official is probably the most difficult eye mechanics phase you will work in any play in football. Is when you go from back judge, particularly if you've got three deeps, you're going back judge focusing on returner to okay catch and no interference. medium eyes, wide eyes, and you start picking up those blocks in front as the deep wings start becoming short wings. And short wings.
Oh, James froze up on us a little bit, but he was referring to the reverse mechanics that are going to come into play now on the punt, where
Yeah.
the short wings are now the
Mhm.
deep wings and vice versa.
And I have some experience with games, not a game with James, where sometimes as a deep wing, you are in a better position, let's say eye wise or uh, view cone wise, due to your distance to the situation, where you can see both the return and that block in the back during that transition period. But James and I have talked a lot about that transition period, but um, it's the timing there is usually at the time you are changing from back judge doing returner to blocks. That's when that block happens. Usually, always, just timing wise. So um, what we discussed was holding back longer in your staying with the returner phase, uh, because the deep wings are still transitioning, but they are transitioning from a beneficial field of view to a narrow field of view, whereas you're going from narrow to wide, where you have to need to find out what's going on, if that makes sense. That you're
Yeah.
going narrow to wide, you have to figure out what's going on. You don't have the information, but when you're going wide to narrow, you already have the information.
Good stuff. So my last question I got, and this is from a guest on the chat, asking if you guys don't mind if you can kind of go through what your pre-snap process is for the kick plays. If one of you wants to take a scrimmage kick and the other one possibly free kicks, what you're thinking pre-snap, pre-kick, different things like that.
I can toss out at least a couple of things I do for pre snap for a scrimmage kick, particularly a punt. I'm always looking to go. Well, count and doing all that is one thing, but positioning. Where am I on the field? Am I on the goal line? Where we're kicking from? Where am I? Where am I? Where do I have to move? If I'm not close to the goal line, how far do I have to go if that ball starts bouncing? So those are the first things, and then I usually go check on the gunner. Is he single or double covered? If he's single covered, I'm looking for the chase mode, because if he gets a clean break either inside or outside, they are fast. They will probably get into that Oreo cookie that people used to talk about. That's when blocks in the back and other stuff happens. But if they're in double, I'm looking for. I might need to stay longer just to make sure that he either gets held up cleanly or he tries splitting the double team, and we might potentially have a hold if he splits the double team or if there's a takedown to either side. Um, but that's also usually just clean.
Okay.
And those are like the big particulars for scrimmage kicks for me. Might have missed something though.
Well, I like all that. One of the things that
Yeah,
oh, go ahead, Ryan.
I was just going to say another tip that I always like to do just to alert for fouls and holds and stuff is I say the colors in my head. I say, okay, all right, so red team's receiving, all right, white team's kicking. I say red cannot take down white. Red, and I verbally say that just in my head, so I know we got to change the possession here, and if anything happens crazy, it's on kick play. So. But that's just one final reminder to myself to calm myself down and look for any takedown holds there.
Same. I'll
Especially
usually
on.
verbalize who's receiving, just in case we have like a batting situation or something like that. So I might also say like red is going north for me, so that I know that that's the way red wants to go.
The only thing that I would add to that, all of that's great. One of the things that I try to make sure I have on a scrimmage kick is a really clean sideline, because I know that more than likely I'm going to end up in the white, especially if that ball comes towards my sideline. I want to make sure. I mean, I'm working my sideline all night long with my short wing and trying to make sure that we're keeping a really clean sideline. But I definitely want a clean sideline when I've got a scrimmage kick, because if I'm coming back towards the middle of the field, and more than likely I'm going to be in the white because I'm going to be off the field trying to have a good look at something. I want to make sure I've got a really clean sideline so I'm not running into anybody.
Anybody else? Paul, you got anything?
I just have a question. Usually, or more of a statement. Usually, on a scrimmage kick play, you'll be at the edge of the white because you're that close. In a lot of cases, you're that close to the goal line that you've already started that taper, right, where you taper off towards the goal line. But one tip that I know Bob Wagner was talking about, I was at the Great Lakes Clinic in 2012. He was talking about working at the edge of the white. So the deep wings work at the edge and short wings work on the sideline. So you end up using that entire space, so the coaches can't really get in there, because they're not telling the wing that, but you're not using this part, I can work at the back of the white. No, he's using it. But also you get a cleaner view of the sideline in some cases, where you don't have two sets of eyes going directly down the same line, where you have kind of that stagger. So that's also a tip, working slightly off, almost to the edge of the white, to make sure that the coaches aren't creeping up.
I don't know what you're talking about. Coaches are always back, and the players are always back too. The sidelines, there's never a problem with the
Hardy,
sidelines.
har.
All right, guys. Well, unfortunately, I was hoping to get into muff and momentum, but I think we can do a whole nother episode just on muff plays and force and momentum, I should say. But we've already jumped past that hour mark, and heck, by the time we get off of this one, it could be Sunday for Gauta already, and it's only Thursday night for us here in the U.S.
I think Mike froze up. I just want to
Unite.
say, I just want to say, as we're getting done, guys, I've had so much fun. This has been great, and I mean, y'all changed my mind about being even with a punt returner, and I've learned so much tonight, and I've just so enjoyed hanging out with y'all. Thank y'all so much for having me.
Likewise, thank you guys for taking the time out of your day to discuss football in your very early preseason.
Well, guys, it seems like the technical difficulties have been going all around from Paul Ryan, and now it's hitting my computer for some reason. So once again, I would like to thank everybody for taking the time out tonight. We lost James, I think, for some more technical difficulties. So Kevin, you win. I think you were the only one who didn't have any technical difficulties. You and Gauta win that game. So, but gentlemen, thank you once again. And I was mentioning before, I definitely want to still continue a conversation talking about force and momentum, because I think we can have a whole nother episode. Didn't get a chance to dive into that topic tonight, that I know that the deep officials have to deal with on a more predominant basis of a very minor type of play. But it's something that you guys have to deal with more often than me being an umpire having to deal with. But thank you once again. Gauta, good luck next week in your opening of your season, of the domestic season. Wish you nothing but luck. And for everybody that's out there, if there's anything that I can do to help, please feel free to reach out. Once again, I truly do appreciate you guys all, and have a safe.
Thanks, Mike. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, Mike.
Thanks,
James
Mike.
just
So, been a blast.
James texted me and said, send my thanks if you can. So yeah, his internet just failed. So on behalf of James, thanks, and also thank you for having me, and thank you for the well wishes. It's going to be interesting. At least the snow's gone, so we'll have clear sidelines.
There you go.
Okay, thank you guys.
Good stuff. Have a good season,
All right.
Gata.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks,
care.
guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you guys. Have a good one.
Have a good night. All right.